Millionaire invites housekeeper for a joke. But when she arrives beautifully, everyone's shocked. Mark Thompson lounged in his grand marble-filled living room, swirling a glass of expensive whiskey. Despite the wealth surrounding him, a disquieting emptiness gnawed at his core. He was a millionaire, yet the prestige felt as hollow as the crystal goblets glinting under the chandeliers. The newest idea for entertainment bubbled in his mind, a reckless jest inviting Maria, his longtime housekeeper, to an exclusive dinner party. He imagined the uproar, the laughter that would ensue from his high society friends. But even as he chuckled at the thought, a deep unease flickered, a fear that this joke would unveil something profound he was unprepared to face. As the days ticked by, anticipation fused with tension in a heady mix. It gnawed at him with every email sent and each cocktail mixed. He walked through the vast expanse of his mansion, past the ornate rooms that meant little to him, consumed by the growing unease. He watched Maria bustle around, her work effortless, her presence nearly invisible in the world he inhabited. She had always been more than a housekeeper. She was a constant in the chaos of his life. But he had never seen her as she would be at this dinner. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The night of the dinner unfurled, with his guests arriving in swathes of designer gloss. Laughter erupted, a thin facade covering layers of privilege. Mark's heart thudded in anticipation and dread. They bantered and sipped expensive wine, all destined to a crescendo of turmoil. The chatter dimmed at the expected reveal of Maria, the punchline. He sensed the brewing storm amidst their laughter. But then, she entered in a gown that cast her in a new light. The air thickened, and for the first time, he was struck by her undeniable presence. His guests' whispers turned into gasps, disbelief replacing their derision. As she gracefully navigated the awkward interactions, Mark felt something shift within himself, palpable and terrifying. The room was charged. Their images of superiority were rocked as Maria began weaving stories of depth, conversations about art and poverty, challenges they'd never fathomed. She was no longer the invisible staff, but a force shifting the dynamics of power right before his eyes. Mark's facade shattered, emotions swirling like a tempest. Could he confront the reality of this moment? Existence weighed heavy on him. Would he turn a blind eye to this awakening, retreating back to empty laughter, or truly engage, confront his inner loneliness? The air crackled as Maria's compassionate insights loomed, forcing every attendee, especially himself, to reckon with whom they deemed worthy of empathy and respect. The world in that room receded to a hush, leaving only the raw truth suspended in the balance. As Mark prepared to respond, a sense of dilemma washed over him. The options glared starkly. He had to choose: stay cloistered in his gilded cage or step forward into the unease with Maria illuminating the path. The laughter hung like a fragile thread in the air as he clutched his whiskey glass, anguish filling him. What would he decide in this pivotal moment? The unfolding of the evening lay heavy, charged, and uncertain, pushing him toward a precipice he wasn't sure he was ready to face. Mark's heart raced as the heavy silence descended. The room's attention turned to him, their expectant gazes as piercing as swords. He could feel the weight of years spent masking his insecurities beneath layers of privilege. Uncertainty clawed at him, a quiet roar juxtaposed against the vibrant tension in the air. In that moment, he had a choice: to break the patronizing laughter that had disguised their reality, or to maintain the facade that bound him to his gilded life. "Maria," he finally managed, his voice steadying. You don't deserve to be a punchline." The words felt like an explosive release, a fracture in his carefully constructed world. There was no laughter now, only the murmur of surprise rippling through his guests. Their expressions morphed from amusement to confusion, opening a door to a conversation he hadn't anticipated. Maria's eyes locked onto his. A mix of surprise and acknowledgement sparkled in her gaze. "It's okay, Mark," she replied softly. Her voice carried a strength that resonated in the quiet. "I know who I am, and I know my worth." For the first time, he saw the woman behind the role. Her dreams, struggles, and resilience. It was a juxtaposition to his own hollow pursuits, a mirror reflecting back his own deficiencies. An unsettling thought crept into his mind, intertwining with admiration. Did he have the same resolve? Was there a path in front of him that mirrored what she represented? He had long relied on wealth and status to define him. But in that moment, an inner voice began to challenge that narrative. What if he stripped away the layers that held him captive? Would he find freedom in vulnerability? His guests were in stunned silence. They were unaccustomed to seeing the man behind the facade. Laughter had given way to something deeper, a crack in the polished veneer of their elite lives. Mark's embarrassment morphed into something more powerful, a burgeoning desire for change. He glanced around the room, noting expressions transforming from superiority to contemplation. The very air felt charged with questions long left unasked. He cleared his throat, driven by something he hadn't felt in a long time, a genuine impulse to connect. "I've lived so long pretending that my wealth defines me, but tonight has opened my eyes to something so much more significant. Seeing you tonight, Maria, and how you grasp every moment with such dignity, it makes me reflect on my life choices. I don't want our friendship to be just a transaction of employer and employee. I want to learn from you." His admission hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. The realization washed over him. This wasn't just about associating with the upper crust. It was about breaking barriers and reshaping his understanding of connection and compassion. Suddenly, the walls that had once separated him from Maria started to crumble. The idea of mentorship, a partnership based on mutual respect, ignited a flicker of hope. Maria's smile widened, light breaking through their tension. "I think you've just taken the first step, Mark. It's never too late to redefine who you are." Her voice resonated with conviction, sparking something within him that he desperately needed. A challenge, a call to seek the depths of his potential beyond the material. As the dinner continued, Mark's heart raced with newfound resolve. This had shifted from an embarrassing moment to an undeniable urge for transformation. He glanced around the room, his guests' whispers now a distant hum. He felt lighter, illuminated by self-awareness and a desire to connect authentically. But as he embraced this unfamiliar path of self-discovery, he wondered, could he withstand the scrutiny of those who only knew him as the wealthy tycoon? The pressure to return to his old ways loomed large. The night wore on, and as laughter resumed, Mark made a silent vow to himself. The real test was yet to come. Would he truly have the courage to navigate this uncharted territory of honesty and vulnerability? His gaze returned to Maria, unearthing an unexpected sense of strength and vulnerability. An urgent question echoed through his mind, threatening to unravel everything he had just begun to understand. Would this new journey of self-discovery lead to a deeper connection, or push him irrevocably off course? The following day, Mark awoke with a lingering tension in his chest. The echoes of his revelation danced in his mind, refusing to let him return to the comfortable stupor he was once contented with. He stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, half expecting to see the man he once knew. Instead, he found a stranger, eyes suddenly aware, brows furrowed with uncertainties. Determined to explore this new path, he decided to invite Maria for coffee, a small yet significant step away from the structured hierarchy of their lives. He could hardly believe his own impulsiveness. It felt thrilling, yet terrifying. But how could he discuss anything meaningful in the same breath he had once uttered empty pleasantries? Mark arrived at the cafe, a quaint spot far removed from the industry-driven grind he was used to. The muted sounds of conversation and the aroma of roasted coffee filled the air, grounding him momentarily. He found a corner table, his fingers drumming anxiously on the wooden surface. Who had he transformed into? He questioned whether he could truly navigate a conversation that didn't rely on the power dynamics of wealth. When Maria arrived, the sunlight laced through the windows, illuminating her features in a way that rendered the room nearly silent. His heart quickened with a blend of admiration and fear. What did he expect? Was he hoping for enlightenment? Or was he simply retreating into the comfort of her apparent authenticity? "Hi, Mark. Thanks for inviting me," Maria said, her smile warm but guarded. They exchanged pleasantries that felt both familiar and foreign, an acknowledgement of shift in their relationship lying in the air like an unresolved chord. "Maria, I need to talk about last night," he said, his voice steady, but laced with urgency. "I realized how dismissive I've been of not just you, but everyone around me. I want to change that." The admission felt heavier coming from him, as if he was not only speaking words, but lifting the weight of all his past indifference. "I appreciate that, Mark," she replied, her gaze penetrating. "It's important for you to explore this, but change isn't easy." Mark bristled at the notion. Did she think he couldn't handle it? The challenge simmered within him. "I know it won't be easy, but I have to try. I've lived too long beneath a facade, using wealth as a shield. I want to understand life beyond the privileges I have taken for granted." Her eyes softened, and Mark was surprised to find admiration reflected there. That's a significant realization. But remember, there's a difference between recognizing a problem and committing to fixing it. He leaned forward, hungry for insight, desperation creeping into his tone. What if I truly fail? What if this change only exposes more vulnerabilities, and I end up losing everything? "Failure is a part of growth," Maria responded firmly. "But more than that, it's about confronting what lies beneath. The fear of losing your status and reputation may be daunting, but it seems like those aren't the things that truly define you, at least not anymore." Her words struck a chord deep within him. What if the discomfort he felt was just a lingering echo of the life he was ready to shed? What if he could channel this fear into something productive? A plan began to take root in his mind, one that would involve more than just self-reflection. He needed action. "I want to help with community outreach events. Something substantial. I can use my resources to make a real impact, to turn this guilt into something productive," he declared, renewed conviction igniting within him. "Community outreach?" She raised an eyebrow, her expression a testament to both skepticism and intrigue. "You'd be stepping into unknown territory. Are you prepared for the criticisms, the judgments from those who expect you to adhere to your old ways?" "Yes," he affirmed, surprised at his own certainty. "I refuse to crumble under scrutiny. If anything, I want to harness it as fuel." As they continued their conversation about possible outreach ventures, Mark felt anticipation course through him. This was not merely about hosting events. It was about severing the conditional ties that previously defined his relationships. But as excitement built, another thought crept in. Was he ready to confront the critics? The thought of facing former peers who would deride his journey filled him with trepidation. The meeting wrapped up, and as they stood to leave, a sense of clarity flooded Mark's mind. Every relationship he encountered from now on would demand honesty. But with honesty came vulnerability, a reality he still felt unprepared to master. He followed Maria outside, and as she drove away, his resolve solidified. He was committed to the leap ahead, but the question remained. Was he truly ready for this journey that demanded not only his authenticity, but also confrontation with the echoing voices of doubt and judgment? With the air thick with uncertainty, He watched her car disappear around the corner, contemplating what lay ahead in his new reality. Mark felt the weight of the cafe's atmosphere dissipate as he stepped back into the brisk air. The encounter with Maria had shifted something deep within him, igniting a sense of purpose he hadn't fully grasped until now. Yet, as the sun filtered through the trees lining the street, illuminating the path ahead, doubt prickled at the edges of his resolve. Was he truly prepared to face the critics of his past? He navigated his way home, each step filled with a new energy he hadn't felt in years, a mix of apprehension and determination. As he entered his lavish apartment, the opulence that once encapsulated his identity now felt suffocating. He glanced around, the walls adorned with awards and accolades waiting silently to guffaw at his claimed transformation. He clenched his fists, unwilling to let those shadows dictate his worth any longer. That very evening, Mark sat down with a pen and notepad, ready to carve out his intentions. Each line penned felt like an act of rebellion. He would not just participate in outreach, but come to embody the very changes he sought to nurture. He scribbled plans, ideas blooming like wildflowers amid the concrete of his carefully curated life. Workshops, mentorships, and genuine dialogues took shape on the page, each word cutting through the clutter of his old pursuits. Yet within this newfound excitement lingered an unsettling question. Who would listen to him? The idea of confronting his former colleagues haunted him. They had built their careers on ambition and exclusivity. Would they see through his facade and recognize a charlatan desperately trying to rewrite his destiny? He shuddered at the thought. But then another thought emerged, one that sparked more than fear. What if he established credibility through authentic action? The next day, fueled by uncertainty but a reckless resolve, Mark called a few local organizations focused on education and mentorship. The more he spoke, the more the heaviness in his chest began to lift. He was met with warmth and encouragement, their excitement contagious. Each conversation peeled away layers of his hesitant identity, revealing a man who had long buried his desire for connection beneath polished surfaces. As he shaped his new role, Mark sought out Maria once again. "I'm ready to start this journey," he told her. "I want to do everything I can to dismantle the barbed wire of elitism I've been bound to." Maria regarded him with a blend of admiration and wariness, understanding the chasm he must bridge. "You'll need allies, Mark. It's not just about your willingness. You'll need to build trust, especially from those who've been hurt by your kind before." This realization stung. Was it naive to think he could simply step into this new light without consequences? A part of him relished the challenge, yet deeper down, a whisper of concern warned him of potential pitfalls. As their plans unfolded, an opportunity arose to deliver a speaking engagement at a local school. It was a chance to share his story, but the idea of standing in front of students from diverse backgrounds, many of whom had experienced hardship firsthand, filled him with equal parts excitement and dread. The night before the speaking engagement, he stood in front of the mirror once more. He rehearsed his words, battling impending self-doubt. Would his admission come off as sincere or condescending? Just then, his phone buzzed with a message from an old friend, someone solidly entrenched in his past life. It was an invitation to an exclusive charity gala happening soon, a relentless reminder of the world he was trying to escape. He stared at it, the glittering allure of the event tugging at a familiar thread woven into his identity. But as he weighed his options, an instinct sparked. This was not the path he wished to tread anymore. Yet, a riptide of insecurity gnawed at him. Could he firmly step into this new part of himself while still being connected to the old? An overwhelming current of doubt rushed through him, threatening to eclipse the newfound purpose he had fought to embrace. With the gala invitation still poised in his hand and the engagement looming closer, Mark faced an inevitable reckoning. The choices he was beginning to make would either solidify his evolution or throw him back into the depths from which he was trying to emerge. With determination pulsing through him, he decided in that moment He would continue this new journey, but the stakes were higher than he ever anticipated. Would he ultimately stand firm in his new conviction, or would the familiar embrace of an old life lure him into complacency once more? The day of the engagement arrived, and Mark stood behind a modest podium in a brightly lit school auditorium, the air thick with expectation. He surveyed the sea of students, their faces reflecting a blend of curiosity and skepticism. This was not a boardroom filled with executives. These were young minds who had battled real challenges, and here he was, a former Titan stripped of his armor, exposed and vulnerable. As he shuffled his notes, the rhythmic thrum of his heart echoed in his ears. He took a deep breath, willing himself to embrace the fear instead of shying away from it. He recalled Maria's words about trust and allies, how vital it was to form authentic connections with individuals who had every right to distrust him. This was his opportunity to communicate his journey, not just as a tale of redemption, but as an authentic plea for understanding. "Thank you for having me," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "I've spent most of my life in a bubble, one that I thought was impenetrable. Success, awards, recognition, they all felt like badges of honor. But in reality, they were barriers separating me from genuine understanding." As he spoke, he felt the audience's gaze shift, their attention sharpening. Mark opened up about his past, sharing stories not of triumph, but of disconnection and hollow victories. He revealed how he built walls around himself as a means of survival, but ultimately found himself lonely and unfulfilled behind them. The hesitation in his chest ebbed away with each confession, and he felt lighter, freer. A ripple of understanding spread through the crowd. Some students leaned in, their expressions softening. It seemed they were beginning to see him not as an oppressor, but as a flawed human being. Yet, doubt lurked at the edges of his awareness. Would they see his transformation as genuine, or merely a desperate attempt to regain their trust? Mid-sentence, he caught the eye of a girl in the front row, a young woman who wore an expression of cautious intrigue. Her attentive gaze felt like an anchor, offering him the strength to confront the uncomfortable truths within himself. "I've sat in comfort while many have fought to be heard. But I'm here today not to seek forgiveness, but to offer solidarity. I want to learn how to be a better ally, someone who can help, without the elitism that once defined me." As he concluded, a silence fell, heavy with contemplation. Applause broke the stillness, more tentative than enthusiastic. It was a cautious acceptance, a recognition of vulnerability shared. After the talk, students approached him with questions and comments. Each conversation was raw and genuine, and for the first time, Mark felt the collective warmth of hope. Yet, resistance remained in the form of harsh truths about the barriers he had erected by his own choices. Later that evening, alone in his apartment, Mark felt a familiar tension return. He sifted through the day's events, realizing the correlations between his old life and the choices that lay ahead. While he had given something of himself today, he also recognized that this was just the beginning. The applause and acceptance could easily morph into skepticism if he didn't follow through with his intentions. Then, as if waiting for him, the invitation to the gala lay on the table. Its glitz shimmered like a siren's song, beckoning him back to the familiar thrill of prestige and praise. It would be easy to slip back into that world, to bask in the adoring glances of former colleagues and industry elites. But as Mark held the invitation, the weight of yesterday's conversations echoed in his mind. Could he truly abandon this pursuit of authenticity? An epiphany gripped him. Accepting the invitation would mean retreating into a cocoon that suffocated his progress. For a moment, he considered reaching out to old friends, polishing up on the persona they admired. But as he pictured the students he had just spoken to, their eyes reflecting both hope and caution, the allure of the gala felt dull and hollow. In that moment, he made a decision. He would decline. He would invest in his newfound purpose, recognizing that the climb towards building credibility and trust would be littered with missteps, but driven by an intention that felt genuine. As he texted his regrets to the gala, a thrill coursed through him, the realization that in letting go, he was allowing space for something new to blossom. Yet a troubling question lingered in the back of his mind. Would this be enough, or would the shadows of his past pull him back when he least expected it? With a deep breath, he turned his focus back to the journey ahead, aware that the real test was yet to come. Would he withstand the allure of his old life as he sought to foster genuine change? And what would it mean for him when he eventually faced the very critics he had tried to escape? Mark woke the next morning with a newfound clarity, the remnants of last night's decision still resonating in his chest. He climbed out of bed, the sunlight pouring in through the window, illuminating the scattered remnants of his previous life. Trophies on the shelf, business magazines littering the coffee table. Each artifact now felt like a relic of someone else's story, a narrative he had outgrown. He brewed a cup of coffee, staring out at the bustling city below. The echo of laughter and chatter in the streets was a far cry from the somber self-reflection of the night before. But today would be different. Today, he would take concrete steps toward being the ally he had promised to become. With a determined breath, he opened his laptop and found the email address of the school where he had spoken. He had left the students in a state of reflection, but he needed to deepen the conversation. He crafted a proposal for a series of workshops, spaces for their voices to be heard, where they could explore their challenges and aspirations in a supportive environment. The thought sent a rush of purpose through him. Yet, as he prepared to hit send, a small voice nudged at his confidence. What if they viewed him as a false leader? What if they dismissed his efforts as just another instance of a privileged person trying to capitalize on their struggles? Mark hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. No, this was not about his past. This was a chance for genuine connection, and he had to believe in that. He pressed send with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, a nervous energy buzzing through him. The hours stretched on as he awaited a response. Each notification on his phone sent ripples of hope and dread racing through his insides. Would they see his intentions for what they truly were? Or would they perceive him as yet another figure trying to brandish the weight of their struggles for personal gain? Days passed, and with each sunrise, Mark pushed himself to step outside of his comfort zone. He spent his evenings engrossed in community literature, rooting through materials that could provide insight into the lives and perspectives of those he sought to support. He listened to podcasts about social justice, worked on empathy-building techniques, and sought out forums where he could learn from others, uncovering threads of vulnerability and strength woven through their stories. Finally, a reply came through. The school's faculty was enthusiastic about his proposal. They believed in the potential for a workshop series that would empower students to share their experiences and develop tangible skills. Relief washed over him. Though it was laced with pressure, he could not disappoint them. With renewed vigor, he mapped out what each workshop might look like. He would set the tone for openness, authenticity, and vulnerability, guiding students not as an authority, but as a partner in their journey. Just as he thought he had found a rhythm, his phone buzzed again, and a notification from an old colleague flashed across the screen. It was a group text inviting him to regroup with former employees, a meeting that echoed off the corridors of his past life. The allure of nostalgia tugged at him, coaxing him with promises of camaraderie and shared victories. He felt the intoxicating temptation to reconnect with the familiar faces that once populated his world of accolades. Mark frowned, feeling the conflicts swirling inside him. Attending that gathering could provide a moment of validation he had craved, yet it might also lead him away from the path he was now carving out. He closed his eyes, grappling with the dualities of his choices. Could he integrate this part of his life with the new identity he was forging? Could he face those who had once championed him without losing sight of the responsibility he now embraced towards those he sought to empower? As he stood teetering on the precipice of the past and future, Mark felt the gravity of his decision. The future was inviting, but the past loomed large, a testament to who he was and what doors he had to either close or open. The question awaited him in the stillness. Would he stand firm against the pull of his prior life, or would he succumb to its seduction? The meeting was set for Friday evening, and as that day approached, Mark felt the tension coil tighter in his chest. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, where the seductive pull of the familiar beckoned him to jump back into the depths of his past. Reliving those old days of corporate success in the arms of former colleagues was tempting. Yet every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of the students he had recently connected with. Their hopes and fears echoed louder than the laughter of his past. He decided to walk to the location of the meeting, perhaps to clear his thoughts, or to prepare himself for the cognitive dissonance he would surely face. As he navigated the bustling streets, he could almost hear the echoes of his former self, urging him to embrace the success he once sought. Ironically, it was this very hustle that felt void, a far cry from the meaningful work he sought to construct in those workshops. With each step, he replayed the memories of victories that had once defined him. Mornings filled with board meetings and evenings hustled away in business dinners, while the real victories, the personal connections of understanding and empathy, had been lost beneath the weight of expectation and competition. As he neared the venue, the familiar building loomed ahead. Its glass facade reflected the sun, glimmering like it was beckoning him back with promises of recognition and pride. Doubt crept in again. What if this gathering reinvigorated his restless ambition? What if walking through those doors reignited that primal desire for validation that had driven so much of his previous life? He hesitated at the entrance, heart pounding, contemplating the impulse to turn away and simply keep walking. Would he emerge from the reunion feeling inspired, or would he spiral back into the confusion he had just begun to unravel? Taking a steadying breath, he chose to push forward, a decision both liberating and terrifying. Inside, the atmosphere pulsed with excitement as familiar faces broke out in laughter, recalling stories of past successes and inside jokes. Mark felt an instant buzz of nostalgia wash over him. Friends, mentors, and familiar rivals gathered for what felt like a celebration of everything he had wanted just weeks before. Yet, as he mingled among them, the genuine warmth of their camaraderie began to feel oddly hollow. Their conversations, laden with achievements, promotions, and ambitions, clashed violently with the values of empathy and authenticity he had been striving to embrace. Mark realized that he was already shifting, no longer the same person who had once easily engaged in this world of competition. There was a growing realization that growth often means leaving others behind, even well-meaning friends. He felt like a ghost existing in two worlds, no longer fitting in entirely with one, yet not fully accepted in the other. His internal struggle manifested in conversations. He fielded questions about his current pursuits, redirecting the narratives around him to focus on the students and the workshops that were taking shape. A few colleagues eyed him with a mixture of admiration and skepticism. "You've changed," one observed, a hint of disbelief coloring her voice. "I'm trying to," Mark admitted, the weight of his own evolving identity settling heavily in his mind. As the night wore on, fragments of discomfort began to resurrect questions he thought he had already answered. Was it possible to hold on to the past while building a new future? What sacrifices would he have to make in his personal growth? He excused himself from the group for a moment of fresh air. Outside, the city pulsated beneath the stars, and he sank against a cool wall, wrestling with his identity, feeling torn between the longing for acceptance and the drive for authenticity. As he stared back at the building, the laughter inside swelled around him, reminding him of how far he had come, yet highlighting the chasm that now existed between who he was and who they expected him to be. Did he dare stay in this orbit, or was it finally time to chart his own course? The tough choice flickered in his mind. He was at the wind-swept edge of two worlds. In that moment of conflict, He sensed the stirring of another possibility blossoming within him, a yearning to confront the past without succumbing to its gravitational pull. But deeper still lurked the question, could he face his former life head-on and reshape the narrative in a way that honored his journey? With that thought hanging overhead, Mark's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from the school, an invitation to visit the students for an impromptu session to evaluate the workshop plan. Would he prioritize the new path he'll make or keep letting the past dictate his decisions? He took a deep breath, feeling an electric wave of anticipation wash over him. The decision lingered like a compass, pointing him toward a potentially profound new chapter. Mark leaned against the cool wall, absorbing the weight of the decision that lay before him. The vibrant noise of the gathering faded behind the barrier of glass, like a distant memory, and with each breath, he felt more anchored in the present. This fleeting moment of solitude was both a refuge and a crucible. He could feel the pressure building within him, propelling him toward a reckoning with his past. His phone vibrated again, a new text message. It was an update from the school, detailing the logistics for the impromptu student session. His heart raced at the prospect. Here lay an opportunity to return to what truly mattered. Yet part of him remained tethered to the past, anxious about what such a leap would entail. He glanced back at the party, a swirl of colors and laughter entrancing his former colleagues. Just moments ago, he felt the magnetic pull of their world drawing him back. Now, though, he experienced a subtle shift within, an urge to forge a new connection, not just with those students, but with himself. Mark took a deep breath and pulled himself away from the wall, his thoughts solidifying into a plan. He might not have clarity about every aspect of his future, but he understood one thing. Returning to the workshop could help rejuvenate his sense of purpose. The echo of the students' aspirations now trumped his longing for validation. He wanted to cultivate resilience and self-discovery, both in himself and in those eager minds waiting to learn. As he made his way home, his mind spun with ideas for the session. What could he share that would ignite their flames of curiosity? The testimonies of his missteps might be his greatest strength. Offering them wisdom shaped by vulnerability could make all the difference. He felt alive with anticipation, a sense of empowerment building within him. Quietly, he fleshed out his objectives for the meeting with the students. He envisioned a space where they not only absorbed knowledge, but engaged in dialogue. He wanted to create an inclusive environment ripe for exploration, where failure was seen not as a setback, but a potential pathway to growth. Yet, amid this resolve, doubt nudged its way in, inciting a twinge of anxiety. Would they accept his message? What if they viewed him just as another transient figure, rather than a mentor eager to share and learn? Strengthening his resolve demanded he confront that fear head-on. It was hard to shake off that old instinct of needing approval, but he realized that this time it was more about connection rather than acceptance. The night deepened, and the city transformed into a labyrinth of lights and shadows. The hum of activity had begun to soften, mirroring his shift in focus. As he arrived home, a feeling of calm waved over him. However, deep inside, the pull to his former life persisted, lingering just enough to remind him of the fragility of his new path. Mark settled into his space, a mug of tea warming his hands. Pacing back and forth, he ran through different scenarios in his mind for the upcoming session. Then, a jarring thought pierced through the calm. Would this new role cost him more than he was prepared to give? Moments from his past, the sacrifices, the endless hustle, chained him with shadows of anxiety. Would he risk everything he built to face the very fears that once defined him? As he wrestled with this realization, a flicker of hope also ignited within. The revelation of guiding others could fortify his own journey. Perhaps stepping beyond the boundaries of comfort would liberate him from the ghosts of his past. Just as he reached a point of resolution, a knock echoed through the silence of his apartment. The unexpected sound broke his concentration, shaking his internal dialogue. Who could it be at this hour? Mark opened the door, and a single envelope slipped into his hands, a scholarship contest announcement targeting aspiring educators. It was as if fate intervened, presenting a challenge he never expected but desperately needed. His heart raced at the possibilities. Diving into this new project, he sensed, might ultimately bridge the two worlds he felt caught between. But with that revelation came another layer of uncertainty. The next decision loomed larger than ever, drawing him further into the unknown and provoking an even bigger question. Would he dare to follow through with a path that could shape both his future and the lives of countless students? The question lingered in the air. The weight of possibility rested heavy on his shoulders. As he closed the door and turned back into the depths of his space, Mark knew there lay a slippery slope between retreating into the past and embracing an uncharted future. The fleeting power of that moment hung in the air as Mark scanned the scholarship contest announcement once more. Each word felt infused with potential, daring him to step outside the confines of comfort he had built. This was not merely a test of his capabilities. It was a conduit for growth, an opportunity to elevate both himself and the students he yearned to connect with deeply. He tossed the envelope on the table, and it landed just beside a stack of older lesson plans marked with ink and corrections. Flipping through them stirred nostalgia, mixed with the uneasy awareness of past failures. Those plans represented not just academic content, but the foundation of his former self, a self that narrowly defined him by success and accolades. Now, as he looked at that fragility, anger swirled in him. He wanted to punch through the barriers of his past, proving that he could become more than what was outlined in those pages. With each revelation of his inner turmoil, he realized that this scholarship was more than a contest. It was a pathway to redefine his narrative. But would it come at an unsustainable cost? Could he tap into the reservoir of vulnerability that would enable him to share his genuine journey while also competing for this opportunity? The stakes felt colossal. Mark sat on the edge of his couch, the invitation still vibrating with promise in the back of his mind. Each flicker of his thoughts led him down a rabbit hole of questioning. What could he bring to the contest that would be uniquely his? Could he write an application that didn't simply regurgitate achievements, but instead illuminated his passion for mentorship and education? He grabbed a pen and began to jot down ideas with a frenetic urgency. His words flowed in rhythm with the pulse of his racing heartbeat, each phrase pulling him closer to clarity. He envisioned essays that echoed authenticity, incorporating his struggles and failures into a portrait of resilience. But soon, doubt crept back alongside determination, whispering insidious questions. Would judges see value in his openness? Would they appreciate the person behind the application, or dismiss him as an imposter cloaked in insecurity? In that moment, an epiphany struck. Perhaps this was not about convincing others of his merit, but about embracing his truth entirely. What if he could convey a narrative that explored not just where he had succeeded, but how he had stumbled and learned through those challenges? Compiling a chronicle of his past as key to unlocking the future could create a bridge instead of a divide. Encouraged by this new perspective, he recalibrated his thoughts, moving from fear to determination. He was no longer just a participant in a contest. He was an advocate for change within his realm. By sharing his vulnerabilities and lessons learned, he could turn those stories into a powerful teaching tool for students who might share similar fears or setbacks. With renewed vigor, he began to plan the upcoming session with students, eager to integrate the ideas he was developing for the scholarship. How could he convey the importance of embracing failure as a critical piece of personal and professional evolution? But silent fears erupted, disrupting his creative flow. What if they saw him as simply a failed educator, someone unworthy of their respect? He had experienced rejection and setbacks in spades, but this time it felt different. The prospect of guiding others, the struggle to inspire them while recognizing his own complexities, was daunting but necessary. As dawn broke, and the golden rays of light poured into his apartment. Optimism wrestled with anxiety, lending added urgency to his mission. He had to confront those fears directly, using them as fuel instead of shackles. Stepping boldly into an unknown future could not only reshape his own identity, but also inspire countless students to embrace their paths. Just as he sat back, satisfied with his thoughts, a sudden ping from his phone jolted him. A text from an old colleague, hinting at an upcoming networking event, activated a new wave of possibilities and challenges. The choice before him was not merely about attending, but about how much he was willing to share during this critical transitional phase. Should he showcase the vulnerability he had recently embraced, or would he hide behind the facade of past success? Mark took a deep breath, feeling the pull of both opportunity and trepidation. The pivotal question surged once more. Would he risk everything he once cherished to claim a future where he could impact lives deeply? His heart resounded with an echo of urgency, the stage set for choices that would forever alter his journey. He grabbed his coat, a newfound sense of determination igniting within him. The time had come to face more than just his past. It was the moment to confront the fear of what lay ahead, weaving together the intricate tapestry of his uncertain but hopeful future. Mark stood at the threshold of a new reality, overwhelmed by the transformation that had unfolded within him over the months leading up to this pivotal moment. The weight of his past life, once a gilded cage of accolades and endless ambition, was now a mere whisper against the roar of his newly ignited purpose. Today was the day he would lead his first workshop for the students, a manifestation of his commitment to meaningful engagement and authentic learning. As he entered the classroom, he felt the familiar nervous energy pulse through him. This wasn't some boardroom filled with familiar faces. These were young lives filled with potential, but many had been marked by hardship. Mark glanced around at the rows of eager yet uncertain faces staring back at him, and he felt an immense wave of responsibility wash over him. Taking a deep breath, he stepped confidently toward the front. "Welcome, everyone," he began, his voice steady. "Today we're going to talk about something that has shaped my journey, embracing failure." The words hung in the air, prompting an immediate reaction. A few eyebrows raised. He could feel skepticism rolling off some of the students. But that's exactly what he wanted. Real conversations about their challenges. "I want us to shift the way we see failure," he continued, his conviction growing clearer. "I've experienced it in my life, and it's not something to hide from. It's actually a part of growth, a tool for building resilience." As he shared his own stumbles, his youthful ambition laced with naivete, he watched as the initial apprehension melted into curiosity. Laughter erupted at times, particularly when he recounted hilarious misadventures throughout his business career. With each story, he peeled back layers, inviting them into his vulnerabilities, and he noticed their walls beginning to lower. "I want this space to be about you," he urged, "to share your own experiences with failure, triumphs, disappointment, all in a safe, supportive environment. We'll learn from each other." Hands shot up around the room, and he felt electrified by their eagerness. Stories flowed like a current of shared understanding. Laughter mingled with sighs of recognition. Hours melted away, and as Mark wrapped up the session, he felt accomplished. He had managed to forge connections rooted in reality, rather than wealth and status. He didn't just lead, he listened, and in listening, he discovered the profound strength of those young voices. In return, they left him with renewed determination to pursue the scholarship opportunity and further solidify his commitment to educational outreach. Within days, encouraging emails from the school trickled in, filled with excitement about the interaction and requests for more sessions, a testament to what had begun evolving into a community of growth and understanding. Each message filled him with pride and solidified the belief that he could indeed impact lives. But it wasn't just about him anymore. This growth created a ripple effect, pulling his focus beyond his personal ambitions toward a collective aspiration to drive real change. The scholarship application became less about accolades and more about highlighting the transformative potential of these workshops. He poured his heart into crafting an application that mirrored his authentic journey, addressing the hurdles he had faced and how they became catalysts for his sincere desire to foster strength in others. Days turned into weeks, and soon Mark found himself standing before a panel of reviewers. He didn't approach the podium with tangible wealth or corporate backing. Instead, he brought forward a narrative shaped by genuine experiences, self-reflection, vulnerability, and dedication to altruism. By the time he finished articulating his vision of empowering students through shared stories of triumph and failure, he sensed something different in the air. The room crackled with recognition, as if he had cracked an understated code of understanding. "Thank you, Mark. Your vision resonates with our mission," one of the panelists remarked, admiration clear in their voice. "We appreciate not just what you've done, but who you've become." He couldn't contain the smile that spread across his face. Recognition held profound value, yet the weight of approval didn't fill the hollow depths he had once felt alone at. Instead, it invigorated him, propelling his commitment to serving others further into the forefront of his identity. Months later, an envelope arrived with the awaited news. He had been awarded the scholarship. Mark could hardly believe it. The excitement tinged with disbelief felt electric. It was no longer just a personal win. He envisioned leveraging this opportunity to enhance the workshops, creating platforms where students' voices and stories could flourish. His journey culminated here, standing at the intersection between his past ambitions and the personal fulfillment of shared growth. He was no longer the man plagued by the confines of wealth and privilege, but an advocate for perseverance, a mentor driven by authentic connection and empathy. With a solid foundation in mentorship and the growth he had achieved, he felt crystal clear about his new path. Mark had fully embraced a transformative journey of change, not just within himself, but for all the lives he had touched, and the many more yet to come. Now, more than ever, he understood the power of impactful storytelling, both his own and those of others, talking of vulnerability instead of pretense. The journey would continue, and while challenges would inevitably unfold, each step forward brought him closer to a life defined not by riches, but by richness of spirit, and in that clarity lay true triumph. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.